Welcome to the Billion Insight Podcast. I'm your host Shree. We have an exciting episode for you today. Our guest is Aliesha Embleton, who is a renowned childhood development coach, author, and speaker with passion for transforming young lives. Aliesha has spent years helping children develop resilience, authenticity, and an entrepreneurial spirit. Her approach isn't just about academics. It's about crafting well-rounded, confident individuals ready to thrive in a constantly changing world. She's also the author of the insightful book, From Seed to Sapling, which provides valuable guidance for parents and educators. In this episode, Aliesha will share her insight on how parents can better support their kids, practical strategy for development. So, without further ado, let's welcome Aliesha Embleton to the show. So, welcome, ma'am. Welcome to the Billion Insight Podcast. How are you?
Hi, Shree. I'm fantastic. Thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, ma'am. I'm also doing fine. Thank you. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It'll be a wonderful time to have a conversation.
So, ma'am, can we start from the beginning? Let's start with your childhood.
Sure.
So, you were born and raised in Australia, right?
Correct. Yes.
So, ma'am, if I'm not mistaken, you are in your late 30s?
Correct.
So, it is like you're growing up in Australia in 90s.
Mostly, yeah.
So, how it's like growing up in Australia in 90s?
Yeah, look, I think the world in Australia here, it's definitely changed and grown and evolved over the last sort of 2-3 decades, 4 decades. So I did spend all of my youth in Australia, and I've grown up here. I actually moved around and got to experience a number of different places in Australia, which was really exciting. It also, obviously has shaped and created the experiences that I've had as a youth, and being able to learn from those in how I can support the children that I work with and that are in my life now. So, for example, moving around, getting to explore a few different areas of Australia, that did actually mean that I was changing schools every year. And so, throughout that formative primary school years, as we call them in Australia, I believe for America, it's elementary school. Not sure what the terms are elsewhere within the world, but, during those sorts of formative middle childhood sort of years, I did experience a lot of change in my life. And that really has, formed me into who I am today. I got to experience a lot of different school cultures. I got to experience a lot of different teaching approaches. I got to experience a number of different friendship groups and influences from the people around me over those years. And, that all of those experiences really highlighted for me as I've grown up, and obviously in my business now, I very much see the reason that we need to focus on resilience and authenticity and entrepreneurial spirit in our children. Being able to have that resilience to handle those changes each year, to be able to handle the different teaching approaches, to be able to, bounce back where there are these more challenging times in our lives.
Yeah.
Being able to have that authenticity so that we actually know how to show up in that new school each year and things. So, yeah, but I guess for me, all of my early childhood sort of times have really formed me into who I am, and the parenting approach that I bring with my stepkids, the approach that I can bring into my business to help the other children. But those were really sort of formative years for me.
So this is how you interested in childhood development. So, ma'am, you did your degree in behavioral science. Could you tell us about what that is?
So behavioral science is the psychology elements there. So it's really getting to understand how our brains are working, how there is the neuroscience element to it, but it's also very much the inner dialogue that's happening within ourselves. And, how do we approach situations? How are we creating our perceptions of the world? That there's many sort of elements to it in understanding the behaviors of us when when it comes to interacting with others, interacting with ourselves, and interacting with the world around us.
So, ma'am, can you explain us what childhood development coach is and how's your typical day usually look?
So, childhood development coach, it's it's a bit of a unique title, that one. So we have heard of coaches. You know, a lot of us understand that there are coaches out there for all sorts of different things in life, be it career, be it parenting, whatever the different sort of transition coaches. There's many different types of coaches available to us out there. Where I actually look to specialize and focus, though, and the unique difference between a child development coach such as myself versus a parenting coach, is that I actually work with the children in my work that I do. So it's working with that middle childhood stage of development and kids in that period of their life to help them develop the necessary fundamental skills that they need, that are in addition to what they're learning academically, that are in addition to what they're learning athletically. You know, these are those fundamental skills that as adults we all see that real significant value in. You know, like resilience, like authenticity, and what I coin to be entrepreneurial spirit. And I will just provide a little clarity, because a lot of people get a bit confused when I start talking entrepreneurial spirit, thinking that it's just simply around going and starting your own company. And that might be the pathway for some of these amazing kids, but that's not what entrepreneurial spirit is about in the work that I do. It's around the mindset that comes with being really successful in all of those sorts of elements. So if we think of some of the most successful entrepreneurs that we know, they will have that ability to see failure as just simply an opportunity to learn. They don't see it as a negative. They see failing as actually a positive, and it actually just helps to accelerate them on their journey. They have got that growth mindset in how they're perceiving the world. They've got that creativity and innovative thinking. You know, these are all of the traits that I'm focusing on in entrepreneurial spirit. So it's less about going and starting a company. Like I said, that might be their future and that's fantastic for them. But they need a certain level of skills and some fundamental learnings that they have really developed that strength in and shifted their mindset around, you know, such as that fear of failure, which is such a common challenge in the world at the moment for a lot of the youth. So it's being able to shift that into a positive perception of failure and being able to see that as the learning opportunities and the growth that it is. So child development coach is working with the kids and their parents, and that's sort of that nuancing of how a child development coach is so unique in the market, is that I do work with both. I really see that there's so much value in the child learning these things through this educational process in the work that I do with them. But there is such a critical role for parents to be able to support that learning in the home as well. And so it's being able to help the parents along that journey of how they can bring this into their world.
You gave us so many tangents to explore on. So you said that entrepreneur spirit, people often misunderstood it with entrepreneur. As you told, people are thinking that they are just child, so you want them to be entrepreneur at this early age. But what I get from your answer is you are just implanting a seed into the child. In our country, we say it is the entrepreneur kida. It is like entrepreneur worm. So in early days, the spirit inside you look the world in a different lens by acquiring that skill, the entrepreneur spirit. So I can totally get that how important that is, especially in today's world.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's being able to see the world in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and it might be that they then approach their sporting events in a different way, and their training for whatever extracurricular activities that they choose. But it's helping them to see all of these interactions in a completely different light. It's no longer, oh, we didn't win the soccer game and I failed there. This goal that I tried to kick didn't actually land, and we didn't get that point that we needed. Instead, they see it as oh my goodness, we've played so well as a team, and I did try my best. I know that I put all of my effort into it, and what I've learned from this experience is ABC. And so it's being able to have that mindset where they don't see it as something having gone wrong. They really see it as an opportunity for them to reflect on what could they learn from what they've just experienced, and what did they learn? And that really helps to accelerate growth in these kids, both during their middle childhood, but especially as they get into adolescence and towards adulthood. That's where, more personal reflection and self-awareness starts to grow and develop. And so being able to have that ability from a young age to be able to accelerate that growth, that just sets them up for such an amazing journey ahead.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. I do remember when I was a child, I do watch some cartoon TV show, the anime and all. There I got so many lessons from the entrepreneurship. Nowadays I can see that the landscape of what children are consuming, especially in their formative years, is completely, I would say, it's illogical. Cartoons are being telecasted. I don't think they really can get something out of it. So I can totally see how relevant the childhood development coach is, especially in today's era.
Exactly. There's such a different way and a different style of, like you said, they're watching things that are completely different to what we saw. Now they're watching things that typically really short as well. So there's a lot of YouTube shorts or a lot of, whatever sort of short clips.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, one of the important thing which you mentioned earlier is that the fear of failure. My question is, how can parents create a growth-centric environment at home? And how can parents help their children to overcome the fear of failure?
That's a huge question. I could sit here for the next hour just talking on that question alone. It's such an important topic. Look, I think the fear of failure, there are so many different ways that this will show up in children. And as parents, we can just be looking for what kind of cues might we be seeing. So it might be that kids start avoiding certain activities. It might be something that they have previously enjoyed doing, and they claim that they're bored by it. They don't want to do it anymore. They're not interested. They start to avoid, and it might be that they are no longer interested in it. That's okay, but get curious. Is it actually that they're no longer interested, or has the child actually reached that next level of growth in that particular activity? And so now there's that potential for failure again. They're at that next stage of their development. Where this is all sort of coming from is a lot of the kids are getting into this. So there's two elements to the nervous system that are at play when it comes to this. You've got the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system, that's our calm, our rest, our digest. That's where we are more in that calm state, and the body is just actually doing what it needs to do to rest in there. Versus the sympathetic nervous system, which is all around the fight or flight. It's that initial kind of threat response that happens. And what's happening with this fear of failure is that the kids are sitting in that sympathetic nervous system state. And so they're in this threat response. And instead of actually feeling a sense of safety, which is what would happen if they were in that more sort of calm, rest, parasympathetic nervous state, because they're in that sympathetic nervous state, they're actually in that threat response mode. And so what's happening with this fear of failure is that they are starting to perceive this as a threat to them. And they see it as a threat to getting something wrong equals whatever it might be. And it's going to be different for each individual child, but they might perceive getting something wrong means that they then get in trouble, which means that they're not loved. We all know that the parent loves them completely unconditionally, but this is a narrative and a story that that child has created. And so they're creating this sense of fear when it comes to trying something new because they don't want whatever outcome they perceive could happen. So it's being able as parents to create that sense of safety for them so that they can then actually start to slowly get their way back into trying new things and helping them to see the positives of what that is. So when they do try something, it's not focusing on what the outcome was. It doesn't matter whether they win, lose, get it right, get it wrong. It doesn't matter. It's the effort that they've put in before the outcome that needs a point of focus and attention there to be able to assist.
That's a very deep answer, ma'am. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
You know, it is very hard to find out what the child is really good at when they are young. Sometimes child may have a talent for something like singing or dancing, but if they are never exposed to that activity, they may never realize their potential. Of course, schools are playing a crucial role, but sometimes it is very easy to overlook child's unique talents, So, as a parents, how can you identify your child's true potential? What are the strategies you can use? Should you expose your child to different activities early on and check what sticks? So, what would be the ideal way?
That is, again, a really great question. It's actually something that I go through in my book because it is such an important question for parents to be able to answer. And so there's a section in my book, one of the chapters, that actually will help parents to step that through in understanding what is called a genius zone. So it's not necessarily just what the child is good at. That's part of the equation for sure. But it's also what lights them up. What is their area of interest and passions? Now, during middle childhood, this is where kids are actually starting to experiment and explore all sorts of different things. And so they might be, chopping and changing between different interests. This is because they are experimenting. They are trying to work out the answer to that exact question. What does interest them? And so as parents, we can help to support them along that journey and help them to bring a level of awareness through supportive questioning. So, helping the kid to be able to reflect on what was it that they enjoyed about that particular activity that day? What was their favorite part? What was their learning from that particular activity during that day? Again, that's also helping that entrepreneurial spirit with the growth mindset. So that's fantastic, being able to get a double whammy there. But it's being able to help them identify what does interest them. For some kids, they do know really early on. And for some kids, they might need to experiment a little bit more to be able to find it. But as a parent, the practical tip, help them along that journey. Be that guide and that sounding board for them as they work this out. I step that through a lot more detail, and there's a lot of, I think there's about a 4-step process that I take parents through in my book to be able to answer and I guess get some insight into that exact question. And it then also links with various different learning styles and how you can help support your child to experiment in different ways and to try different things with those different learning styles.
Interesting. So, ma'am, according to you, what is a successful childhood?
A successful childhood. I'm not sure that there is one particular answer for that. My take on a successful childhood is where they have actually been able to learn these different fundamental skills that are going to set them up for adolescence and into adulthood. So there's the 3 pillars that I talk about, and then there's obviously a whole heap more fundamental life skills that they're learning. But I think a successful childhood is where they have had the opportunity to learn these things, to create that mindset that is going to be supportive to their growth and development, that they really have a good understanding of who they are and how they want to show up in the world as they then start to explore some of those later years. So being able to understand deeply, what are their values? What does that look like for them? And so I think with all of that comes some of the protective factors, like the parent-child bond, and it being one of the best protective factors for the resilience in children. So that all then links back to making sure that there's that quality time spent with parents and their kids. So it's less so about the quantity as it is the quality. So it's making sure that there is that quality opportunity for bonding, and that is actually really strengthened and developed over the time. I think a successful childhood is just really where they've gotten to learn these different things. They've gotten to understand who they are and be ready to approach the next chapter of what their life is.
Yep. So, ma'am, related to that, I have another question. So, what's your definition of an ideal parent?
An ideal parent. That's another one it's a little bit tricky to answer. I think, again, like the ideal childhood, I don't think there is a single definition that actually that can actually be used to describe it. I think that every person is really unique. Every child is really unique. And what's going to work for one parent, ideally, and for one child may actually end up being something different as the ideal situation for another. So I guess whilst I don't necessarily believe that there is a single definition, I do believe that there are things that parents can do that actually look to enhance their role in raising kids and raising that next generation that we're bringing through. And, a parent is the one who is really role modeling these fundamental traits. For the work that I do, these fundamental traits around resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit. And this role modeling is what's then setting their child up for those increased chances of success. So I guess my element to the question of, what's the definition of the ideal parent is someone who's role modeling how they want their children to grow up.
Mm-hmm. So, ma'am, one thing I notice with the parents, they really unable to give much time to their children, What do you think? How much time should a mother or father spend with their children?
I don't have a particular quantitative figure that I would put on that. And it just simply comes down to quality is actually the key here. So there is a lot of research that has actually been done into this exact question. Everyone wants to know the answer. How much time is the right amount of time? And, I guess when it comes to the element there, what all of the research is showing is that it's the quality that is actually going to create the difference. There was a study published in 2017 that I've seen, and it was actually saying that the time that parents are actually getting to spend with their kids is actually different in this generation as to what it was, say, 50 years ago. And that we're actually spending more time with kids. And so there's actually more of that attention that's being placed there. There was, I guess, another study that was done, I think it was in 2015, that was talking about the total amount of time that was being spent with a mother and the children and what impact that was potentially having on their future. And when it came to the time spent, it was actually the quality that made the difference. And it was less so around how much, for children under 12, it does change a little bit once you reach adolescence. There does need to be a little bit more time as well. And that's simply to be able to help them through the adolescent period where they're needing a little bit more attention and guidance through that time period. But what it actually showed is that before that, there wasn't a particular number that was going to detrimentally impact one way or another, so long as that emotional connection and that quality was there. You know, how parents feel about their role as a parent, how they're feeling about their partner, how emotionally connected they are to children, all of that is actually far more impactful in the child's development and the potential likelihood of behavioral issues or whatever sort of issues there might be than the amount of time that the child is actually potentially in daycare, as an example.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess I spend a lot of time focused on middle childhood, which is that stage just before adolescence, so that the kids have the fundamental skills ready for adolescent sort of time frame. And there are very much some critical elements there about ensuring that the child is actually getting that developmental support for the life skills that they need during that period. And so, you know, making sure that the parents are spending that quality time is then also making sure that they're sharing that. And I mean, quality time doesn't necessarily have to be going and doing a dedicated activity together every single time. Quality time could simply be the drive home. Pick them up from school, that drive home, and having that conversation in the car. It could be the time that you're spending together washing the dishes after dinner. And just, again, having that time where you're connecting. I mean, you can make a bit of fun out of it. There's all sorts of things happening when it comes to washing up. But being able to have those moments of bonding and connection are what's going to be really the critical thing.
That's a very interesting answer, ma'am. And the last part is that is true. You have to be as spontaneous with your child. You shouldn't, it shouldn't be feel like it is a deliberate item, but it's rather a spontaneous. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. The reason I asked this question to you, because I have seen many parents, especially mother, are complaining to their husband that they couldn't able to give that much of time as compared to their mother. I mean, in today's world, both parents most of the time are doing work, but still it's a natural thing. Mother have to spend time with their children much more than the father. But often we see that father kind of gets some excuses to leave this thing to entirely to the mother. So what advice do you like to give to the father in today's world?
The advice that I would provide to all parents, but I'll sort of start with the father there, is that we need to be less. So there's a lot of guilt placed around the time spent with their child. And that is what the research is showing, is that guilt is misplaced. So what the advice that I would say is find those times of quality moments. You know, what is there in your normal day-to-day routine that you can actually utilize it? And maybe it's taking a moment to slow the task down. So we're all very much focused on getting through the task, getting to the next thing on that to-do list. And there's a lot of rush that can potentially happen. So taking a moment to slow it down and see where those opportunities are for connection. You know, fathers have a really special role in supporting the child's development, particularly around areas like confidence, motor skills, their curiosity, their problem solving, their analytical skills. You know, these are such critical areas that fathers bring. In the same way that mothers have a unique, special role in supporting the child's development. You know, for mothers, it's being able to support that emotional regulation, the empathy, the social skills, the cognitive development, their sense of self, and you know, other various different sort of traits. And so it's being able to know that the role as a parent there is so critical and important. Fathers and mothers. And so it's being able to, like I said, just have a look at your day. Where can you find some extra quality time? Not necessarily more time, but more quality time.
Yep, yep. You mentioned the empathy which comes from the mother. In today's generation, especially the Gen Alpha who borns after 2010, the parents of the Gen Alpha is mostly the Gen Y and the early Gen Z. What do you think? The empathy level of today's generation, the today's parents, has been little less compared to the previous generation, the old parents. So how do you think that they can able to deliver and teach the empathy to their children?
Empathy is something that we can learn and develop and teach. So whether we might believe that the parent doesn't have enough empathy or not, and I can't make that decision for other people, but it's what I can say is that empathy is something that can be developed. And so we can cultivate this in our children. There's actually a recent article that I've written on my website that actually talks to cultivating empathy. So that's in the set of articles that is available for people there if they wanted to have a look. But I think we need to just be conscious that empathy is something that is going to be really critical for all of us in our development process. And I think all of us do have empathy. It's being able to bring some awareness to how we can help develop this in our children as well, because it is something that you'll hear me say a lot is that children are learning through the role modeling. And this is also the case with empathy. So if we think about how we're interacting as the adult, even just down at the grocery store, running through the checkout with the items that we're needing, the child is there and observing. And so the question that I would pose to the parent in that moment is, well, how are you interacting with that checkout person? How are you interacting with these staff around you? What role modeling are you showing to the child through those moments as well? Because how they see you interacting with strangers is also how they're going to understand how they should be interacting. And being able to bring that empathy and compassion for people is something that they will then also be able to see and pick up through some of that role modeling.
Yep. So, ma'am, talking about the role modeling, the other day I was talking to other person. He actually told me an interesting thing. He's from America. One of his niece, when she asked to what he wanted to become, she said that she wants to be Kim Kardashian. You know.
Lovely.
So, so what do you think? I mean, the role model thing, especially in today's social media age, has been really. People can't understand that who they should. Make the role model. And so, what's your thought on this?
Look, I think social media, again, that's something we could talk for another 1, 2, 3 hours just on the topic of social media and children. It's such a big hot topic at the moment. In Australia, they're actually looking at potentially changing some of the legislation around the age that children can start interacting with social media. I know this conversation is not unique here. I know this is sort of happening worldwide around what is this impact that we're seeing on our kids with their engagement with social media. And there is no hard and fast rule to any of it. Something that I think is an element that we can help is ensuring that the children, before they reach that time of social media becoming a big thing, because that sort of starts to happen more around age 10 plus. It's less of an issue before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's making sure before social media starts to really connect into their life so much that they actually understand some of the core values for them. And so that way, when they do start to have their world expand beyond their parents, their family, their friends, and their world starts to expand to other broader influences, they still have a ingrained understanding of what they value. And we need to remember as well that for kids, if we say don't do something, that's going to make things look a lot more attractive for them. So we need to bring some guidance instead of, so it's being able to help the child understand. So for the Kim Kardashian example that you sort of talked to a moment ago, it's being able to help them to learn, well, what is it about that actually catches their attention? What do they, what, help them to break it down. Is it that they want to become a public figure? And if so, why? What message is it that they'd like to share with the world? Is it that they want to, be in some sort of film or TV, or, do they want to get into that side of things? Like, what is it that actually attracts them to whatever role model it is that might be sparking their interest in that moment? And additionally, make sure that they do have some really good role modeling from the parents, from the other adults that are in their life, and trust the child to be able to see those really good role models that are there as well. There's
the biggest problem the Gen Alpha generation has, that the biggest issue is the social media.
It is. It is a completely different world that they are living into what any of us grew up with.
Yep.
Their entire world is going to be recorded. Their life is recorded. I saw some stat recently that before the child is, I think before they were 12, they've already got something like 70 million data points about them because of the social media world that we live. Like 70 million data points about them online, that is. There's something large figure like that. Don't quote me on that exact stat. Please look into it if you're interested. But the concept of this remains the same, being that these kids, they are being brought up with the parents being on social media. So that's some of the role modeling that they're seeing as well.
Yeah.
And so they're seeing their lives being sort of displayed out, and, the big moments in their life being shared through social media. And social media has some great positives as well. If we think of COVID in the recent years and some of the great connection that it actually still allowed for people, there are benefits to it, but it's making sure that children are using this in a healthy way. And I think that's the big thing, is teaching them. And even as adults, we might not all know how to use social media in a healthy way, but being able to make sure that we have that self-care happening around social media. So we're actually taking that decompression time after potentially, sitting there scrolling for 10 minutes, having that decompression time and actually taking that moment to reflect and just check in with ourselves. It's being able to, just think of all of those sorts of different healthy habits. And there's so much available research and great insights out there on healthy habits in relation to this. It is some of the elements that I bring into some of the work that I do in the child coaching there, but making sure that we're teaching those healthy habits and instilling those in ourselves as well, so that they're learning through that positive role modeling.
Yep. And I'm thinking the social media is like a fire. We have to teach our children how to use it. If you use it too much, there is a fair amount of chance that you can burn yourself.
Yeah, completely. It is the new world that these kids are growing up in. And whilst it's not what we grew up in as adults, we understand as adults what that world looks like, at least for us in this current role. And so it's being able to, just understand that it is going to be different for them. It is a unique world. Everything in their world is going to be online.
Yeah.
And it is going to be quite different in how they connect with people as well. It's where we used to have to pick up the phone and call somebody. Everything's all via text now, be it in Snapchat or whichever platform.
Yep.
But there is so much that we need to be teaching these kids around how to engage in a healthy way early on.
Yep.
Because it is their world, and we can't deny that. Whilst there is a lot of conversation at the moment around raising the legal age in Australia, kids already find a way around it. They're already creating accounts even below the current legal age.
Yeah.
Is this actually going to fix the problem? I don't believe it will. I think that what we actually need to do is the education for how to do this in a healthy way. How do they still manage to show up authentically online? How do they look to engage in a way that maintains their health and well-being, and that they aren't exacerbating any kind of I guess, they're not impacting their resilience. They're not impacting their authenticity. They're not impacting any of these sorts of elements, because they are looking after their mental health. They are looking after that self-care. They're looking at how they can show up compassionately online. They're, learning how to live in that world that it is.
Yep, absolutely. And as you told me earlier that we adults also, we don't know when to stop it, when to stop endless scrolling. So as you told, the first role model to the children is their parents. If the parents are doing the same thing, so naturally they will learn this from their parents.
Yeah, completely.
So ma'am, I want to talk a little different topic. I know this is not your field of expertise, but I want to talk about it because it is very sensitive topic. I like to know your thought about this. So can you tell us about the narcissist parenting and how does it affect children?
Sure. So I think we need to be conscious that we do throw the term narcissist around pretty freely these days, and it is not necessarily always the best way for us to be talking about things. But I guess where I come with that is that exhibiting just a few narcissistic traits is significantly different than actually being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. It's actually quite common and, reasonably healthy for people to have just a little bit of those narcissistic traits. And that's actually does have its benefits, because it actually helps to contribute to their self-confidence and their self-esteem. The challenge, though, is when that actually gets out of balance, and when that ego and the conceit and everything really sort of gets out of hand, and that narcissism actually becomes a problem. And so if we were to sort of look at that narcissistic parent, well, typically this is going to be a parent who has that low self-esteem, or, they might sort of struggle with criticism, for example. And if we look at those sort of elements and how they relate to some of the fundamental learnings that I speak to needing in children, being these authenticity and so forth, low self-esteem and struggling with criticism, they actually directly relate to authenticity and the entrepreneurial spirit in areas that are missing for that narcissistic parent. So all of those pillars that I talk about are actually really crucial. And they are so crucial to develop resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit, because it provides the foundational skills for that self-esteem, to be able to handle criticism, to be able to, work through these things. And that's what we were just talking about as being a narcissistic parent issue, is that they don't have those. So if parents are actually missing these pillars, they actually may struggle to develop and teach these fundamental skills for their kids. And so these kids then actually don't learn what these, critical foundational skills are that they need for success. And instead, I've mentioned it a few times now, they learn through role modeling. So they're learning that narcissistic role modeling. And so, many times then that these children are actually going to be struggling with potentially having people-pleasing tendencies as they grow up. They also might struggle with emotional regulation. All of these sorts of things can actually also potentially lead to increased risk of anxiety and depression for those children as they grow.
Yep. So what I'm getting from you is that you are saying that we all have some sort of narcissist trait, but the problem will arise when it will be cross the threshold. Am I right with that?
Yeah. So if we break down, what are common narcissistic traits, we're looking at things like, I'm actually going to pull up for us a bit of a list of what are some of the common narcissistic traits that we'll sort of see. So we're looking at, that grandiose. We're looking at so they might overestimate their capabilities, or potentially holding themselves to unreasonably high standards. It might be bragging or exaggerating their achievements. It might be, looking at that belief that they think they are special and unique. It might be that they have that self-doubt or self-criticism. It's kind of like that low self-esteem that I was talking to. That inflated sense of self-worth or expecting favorable treatment. I guess the things that what I'm kind of sort of talking to here is, for example, the thinking they're special or unique. Well, that's actually a good thing to a degree. But it's when that becomes unhealthy that then changes. But every person is special and unique. And we do need to have that understanding and that belief that we are actually special and that we are unique in the world, but not to the point where it becomes overinflated. And that's kind of what I was sort of trying to sort of talk to there, is that it actually helps with a sense of confidence if you do believe that you are special and you are unique. As an example, just looking at that one trait as an example there. And so that will actually be a good thing. That's a healthy element to it. But it's then when it all gets out of hand and that it becomes all about them, that's where it becomes a little bit different, becomes inflated sense of self-worth. And, it just is all over the top. There's so many other traits that don't have a healthy spin on them. That willingness to exploit and manipulate others, for example, various different sort of elements. But what I'm sort of talking to is that there are some things that are actually have a healthy element, and it becomes narcissistic when that actually gets beyond that healthy element.
So to put it out in a simple term, it is like everybody is like a gray. If you put more gray into it, then it becomes black. So kind of we have some sort of this narcissist quality here and there, but there shouldn't be any problem unless it becoming black.
Exactly. When it becomes excessive.
Yeah.
Being able to have an element of caring for ourselves versus being self-centered. Those are two different things. So it's being able to understand what that nuancing actually looks like.
Yep. So ma'am, can we talk about your book, From Seed to Sapling?
Yes.
Can you give us a brief synopsis of the book?
So From Seed to Sapling, it actually just won an award nearly 2 weeks ago. It won the Best Nonfiction Book award here.
Congratulations.
So thank you. But the book itself, it's a journey for parents who are wanting to transform and change the landscape that it is that their child is living in. So it's, I've sort of talked to a couple of the elements to the book during our conversation, but this book is really focused on the 3 pillars that is the point of focus for my work. So that resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit. It takes parents through a journey of understanding, what does this deeply mean? And what are the practical steps that we can do as parents to be able to actually create these amazing skills and really important elements in our kids? These are such great tools that are in the book. There are, every single chapter, there's a little exercise that parents can work through to be able to more deeply bring that particular point of focus into how is it relevant to their child. And so, it really, it's a transformative roadmap, really, parents on how can they take all of this forward.
That's interesting. Are you planning any sequel or any other book which is currently writing or planning to?
Definitely many things more that I want to put out into another book. I think it will probably be another little while away, another year, another 2, not too sure. But there's certainly a lot of ideas that I have that I'm going to start pulling together into a future book. So there is more to come. Watch this space.
We are looking forward to it. And for the listener, the book link you can find in the description. So ma'am, we are on the final segment of our podcast. We call it Instant Insights. I will fire off some quick questions. You have to answer as fast as you can.
Okay, let's do this.
So ma'am, are you ready?
Yep, let's go.
Coffee or tea?
Tea, but herbal tea at that, not just black tea.
Interesting. Cats or dogs?
Oh, neither.
Beach or mountains?
Both.
City or countryside?
Countryside all the way.
Blue or green?
Ooh. I don't think I could pick.
Early bird or night owl?
Oh, I'm very much an early bird.
Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Most recent hobby you picked up?
Meditation.
Interesting. One thing that makes you smile instantly?
A nice sunset.
What is your go-to stress relief method?
Depends on the form of stress as to which coping strategy is going to work. But I do love meditation, but there's also some really good active coping strategies out there. So I kind of flip between them.
Interesting. Best way to spend a weekend?
With family and friends.
Travel back in time or forward in time?
Oh. I don't think I would actually want either. I would actually just rather be in the present.
Interesting. If you could have any dinner guest, dead or alive, who would it be?
I have no idea. I think I would love all of my friends and family there all at once.
Crazy thought, I would say. Interesting, by the way. Best way to handle success?
Celebrate it. All the small wins.
And the opposite, best way to handle failure?
Celebrate the learnings.
Favorite book beside your own?
I was going to say my own. Beyond that, I don't think I could even pick one. I could possibly narrow it down to maybe a top 10, but I couldn't even pick one beyond that. So I'm just going to have to stick with my own book. That's my favorite.
Favorite movie?
Again, I think I
That's
couldn't pick one. Yeah.
So, ma'am, if you weren't a child development coach, what would it be?
I think if I wasn't doing my work as a child development coach, I would still be in the coaching space, but I'd probably be looking in the parental coaching as a specialty instead. I just see so many opportunities for us as to how we can learn about ourselves. And I would love to be able to do that with the adults as well through the parental coaching or self-development coaching. But just being able to help people grow and expand and become more than what they might believe they're capable of doing. Because we're all capable of so much more than we're limiting ourselves to be.
That's interesting. To unleash others' true potential.
Exactly. Unleashing the potential. I love it.
One word to describe your coaching style.
Developmental.
One thing all parents should stop doing immediately.
I don't know that there's anything that I would say they should stop. I would say there are things they should change. So one thing all parents should change immediately is how they're engaging with their own phones. Are they looking at their phone or looking at their smartwatch or looking at a device in a moment where a child is actually seeking their attention?
Absolutely, ma'am. I can totally see that.
And we're all guilty of it at some point in time. But just bring a little bit of consciousness to it. Are we in the moment?
Yep. What one skill should all kids learn by the age of 10?
I can give you 3: resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurial spirit. No, look, I think if we have to pick only one skill, I think it is self-trust.
Believe in yourself.
Believe in themselves and trust themselves to, and with self-trust comes really actually listening to what their emotions are telling them, what their body is telling them, what they actually need to be doing for themselves.
Yeah.
It's self-trust to be able to make sure that they are keeping themselves in the right situations at the right times. Self-trust goes into all sorts of different ways. It affects their confidence, like what you were just saying, their belief in themselves. But self-trust. There's a lot of threads that come out of that self-trust.
Yep, yep. Most misunderstood aspect of child development.
I think the most misunderstood is how people thinking that it's really easy to be able to just, tick a couple of boxes, add in a couple of activities and done. Something is resolved and something is sorted. But the most understood element is that these things aren't learnt once. They are continual learnings. As humans, we're needing to bring that lifelong learner state of mind to things, because what we learn as kids, we're actually still learning as we then get older, and we're just learning it in different ways and at different levels. But we are lifelong learners. We're continually expanding and growing. And so it's that misunderstood element that once you've learned it, you've learned it, because there's always more to learn.
Yep. Once you think that you know everything, then the growth will be stopped there. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. Best way to teach a child empathy.
I'm going to go with role modeling. And just from that example that I was talking to earlier in our conversation, where they are seeing how you're engaging with strangers in your world. So the people you meet at the grocery shop, the people that you meet down at the coffee shop, the people that you bump into, just, how do you wave at the mailman if you see them out there? How are you engaging with the strangers that are in your world? And is there that empathy and compassion and that kindness being brought into those interactions?
One habit all successful kids have.
I don't think I can't think of one habit that they would all have. They all are slightly different in their own way. They're all resilient for sure, but how they bring that resiliency is slightly different. So maybe I'm thinking too much at a granular level there. Maybe it is that, all of these successful kids, they do have that deep resilience.
Yep. Best way for kids to make new friends, because for the work, parents are generally moving one city to other. So what do you think?
Through common interests. So that might be extracurricular activities. It might be that they are in the same class at school, but having that element of commonality, that helps them create conversation and something to bond on. And if it's something extracurricular activity where it is a common, it's an interest and a passion and something that they are wanting and choosing to do, and that the other kids there are also wanting and choosing to do that, then it's far more likely that they have some sort of shared connections there, and that they will be able to develop those bonds.
So according to you, what would be the first thing a child should do in the morning?
So I would love to see all children, when they're waking up first thing in the morning, to actually take a moment to just pause, maybe look out their window, however it is, but just to pause and connect with what's the weather out there in that moment. And I specifically use the phrasing the weather rather than, looking for sunshine, looking for this, looking for that, because it's not always going to be the same. But bringing that element of mindfulness, bringing that element of connection into just being present in that moment, that will then start them off their day with a more calmer sense. It helps to bring it really helps to bring that parasympathetic nervous system more online for them if they're bringing some of those mindfulness techniques, if they're actually sort of creating those opportunities to just really connect and to be present.
Interesting. So to put it in one word, it is like observing the surrounding, the morning.
Yeah, exactly. That mindfulness.
What makes a child feel truly loved? Is it the attention which you will give, the 100% attention, which you already mentioned that earlier? Don't look at your phone while talking to your child. What do you think?
that's definitely part of it.
Hmm.
I think that a child being able to know that they are truly loved, that can also happen in the more challenging moments. So they might be doing something that they shouldn't be doing. They might be, yeah, that, where they're potentially in trouble for something, but being able to have those moments where you're still, they're in trouble, you're talking through the situation that's at play, but you're also reminding them at the exact same time that you love them. And knowing that even when things might not be going great, they're still loved, and that therefore love is unconditional, that is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Often we see one philosophy that don't tell your kids to not to touch the fire. Make them touch the fire. Once they realize that it will make you burn, then they will automatically stop this. So what's your thought on this philosophy?
I think there is an element where we need to let kids learn through natural consequence. And natural consequences are really important, powerful tool for being able to help support their development. But we also need to be conscious of when does it become a good learning opportunity for them versus when it might actually hurt them. And so as parents, we need to be thinking about, is it just simply that they have forgotten to take something to school and they might be a little bit uncomfortable, but they're not going to be in any sort of bad position? Or is it actually going to be detrimental to their health, like touching the fire? And just understanding which one is at play, and is it that we're actually nervous as parents about them doing whatever it is, or is it actually the child that's not going to be good for them? So learning is always going to be fantastic, but learning also has its limits around what they need to learn. Or that they shouldn't be experiencing.
Most challenging part of your job?
Oh, I think the most challenging part of my job is not being able to help all of the kids everywhere, and wanting to see some of these learnings so much more available to other people. So, being able to actually get some of this into the hands of others. I think the most challenging part is not being able to do more.
Yeah. So my most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, seeing the development of these kids as they finish the work and as they actually start to really ingrain these learnings, and being able to see them light up because they are knowing how to navigate all these things, and seeing it all actually come to life in these kids. It's amazing.
Yep. So talking about the reward, what's the best reward for childs for their hard work?
The best reward for the child?
Yeah.
I think for them, it's not a reward that they would necessarily be aware of at that point in time. As they're working through it all, they just think this is more learnings that they have to go through. This is another extracurricular kind of thing that they're having to learn. But the most rewarding thing is that they actually are, when they look back and reflect on it later, they can see that they actually got to learn something so much earlier and so much more deeply than potentially what some of their other peers have been able to do. The learnings for them have just created a whole different pathway, and it's opened up different opportunities than what they would have had otherwise.
Interesting. So, ma'am, what's your thought on this? When parents ask for their children, if you do some certain thing, then you will be rewarded this thing which you wanting. So, what's your thought on this type of bribery? Lack of better word, I said this, but what's your thought on this?
To me, it all comes back again to, are we emphasizing the effort that someone has put in versus the outcome? Because we need to be teaching kids that the effort is where the the attention needs to be focused and that that's where they need to be really developing. Because putting in that effort, it might not always mean that they're actually winning. They might not always get the right grade. They might not always get something, but they need to learn that putting in the effort is what counts. And it's going to be different for every kid in how they learn that, but they need to learn putting in the effort more so than the outcome.
Yep. What do you think? What in you wish all the schools should taught to their students?
The 3 fundamental pillars: the resilience, the authenticity, and the entrepreneurial spirit. There are many schools that I know of that teach some elements of this, and I love that. It is fantastic. But being able to go deeper in the curriculum around these sorts of elements.
So, ma'am, one last question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Only compare yourself to the person you were yesterday. Don't compare yourself to anyone else.
Yep. Great, ma'am. Thanks for sharing that. What's the one last message you would like to give to the parents who are watching this podcast till this point?
I think the only other thing that I would say to parents is that if they want to learn more, if they want to understand how does all of this actually connect in with their particular child, if they want to have a bit of a chat with me, jump onto the website, book a call. There's that opportunity for a free call there so that we can actually have that conversation. You know, how does this connect with their child? And that's really, that's what's going to make all the difference, is how does it connect for their kid?
Yeah. So, ma'am, that's the end of the podcast. Did you like it?
Look, thanks for having me.
Yep,
Good conversation. Hello, everyone. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to Shree's podcast, The Billion Insights. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, take some time to rate the podcast. And if you enjoyed our conversation today, give us 5 stars.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your valuable insight with us today. Your unique perspective on empowering children and fostering resilience has provided our audience with a deeper understanding of how to equip the next generation for success. We are excited to see what the future holds for you, and we wish you all the best.
Oh, look, thank you, Shree. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you, ma'am. And to our listener, if you want to know more about Aliesha Embleton and her book, From Seed to Sapling, all the links can be found in the description. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Billion Insight podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious. This is Shree, your host, signing out. Peace.